Samuel Williams woke up every morning at 4:30 a.m. Long before the sun rose over the city skyline, he lived in a small apartment on the east side of town, where the streets were quiet and the air was still fresh with the coolness of night. Samuel was a janitor at Tech Vision Corporation, one of the largest technology companies in the country. His job was not glamorous, but he took pride in his work and made sure every corner of the building sparkled. By 5 a.m., Samuel was already on the bus heading toward downtown. He always sat in the same seat near the window, watching the city slowly wake up around him. Other passengers were mostly nurses finishing night shifts and factory workers heading to early morning duties. Samuel greeted them with a warm smile, though most people barely noticed him. He wore his dark blue uniform with his name tag pinned neatly on his chest. The bus dropped him off at 5:45 a.m., right in front of the tall glass building where Tech Vision had its headquarters. Samuel pulled out his ID card and swiped it through the security system at the front door. The building was completely silent, with only the hum of computers and air conditioning systems breaking the stillness. He loved this time of day when the building belonged only to him. Samuel headed straight to the supply closet on the first floor. He gathered his cleaning cart, loaded it with spray bottles, microfiber cloths, trash bags, and floor cleaning supplies. Everything had its place on his cart, and he made sure it was organized perfectly before starting his rounds. He checked his list of daily tasks, which included cleaning the lobby, restrooms, break rooms, conference rooms, and all the office spaces on 3 floors. His first stop was always the main lobby. Samuel swept the marble floors carefully, making sure to get into every corner and under every piece of furniture. He wiped down the reception desk, polished the glass doors, and cleaned the fingerprints off the elevator buttons. The lobby had to look perfect because it was the first thing employees and visitors saw when they entered the building. Samuel took extra care with the company's logo displayed on the wall, dusting it gently until it shined. Next, he moved to the restrooms. This was one of the most important parts of his job. Samuel cleaned and disinfected every toilet, sink, and mirror. He made sure the soap dispensers were full and the paper towel holders were stocked. He mopped the floors with a fresh-smelling cleaning solution and made sure there were no water spots or streaks anywhere. Samuel believed that clean restrooms showed respect for the people who worked in the building. While he worked, Samuel often listened to his small radio. He tuned into different international stations throughout the morning. Sometimes he listened to French news, other times Spanish music, or German talk shows. As he cleaned, he would repeat phrases and sentences he heard, practicing his pronunciation quietly to himself. Learning languages had become his passion over the years, and his morning cleaning routine gave him the perfect opportunity to practice. By 7 a.m., Samuel was working on the 3rd floor, where most of the executives had their offices. He emptied trash cans, wiped down desks and chairs, and vacuumed the carpets. He was always careful not to disturb any important papers or personal items on people's desks. Sometimes he would find thank you notes left for him, which always made his day brighter. Most employees never saw him, but some appreciated the work he did to keep their workspace clean and comfortable. The building started to come alive around 8 a.m. Samuel could hear the elevator doors opening and closing as early employees arrived for work. He heard the sound of high heels clicking on the marble floors and the chatter of people greeting each other. Samuel continued his work quietly, moving through the hallways with his cart, staying out of everyone's way. He had perfected the art of being invisible, of doing his job so well that people barely noticed he was there. Samuel took a short break at 8:30 a.m. in the janitor's room on the basement level. He sat on an old plastic chair and opened his thermos of coffee, which he had prepared at home. While he drank his coffee, he pulled out a small notebook where he wrote down new words and phrases he had learned that morning from his radio. His notebook was filled with vocabulary in 10 different languages: French, Spanish, German, Italian, Portuguese, Arabic, Mandarin, Russian, Japanese, and Hindi. Each page was carefully organized with translations and pronunciation notes. After his break, Samuel returned to finish the remaining tasks on his checklist. He cleaned the break rooms, wiping down countertops, cleaning out the refrigerator, and making sure the coffee stations were spotless. He swept and mopped the cafeteria floors and arranged the chairs neatly around the tables. Every task he completed brought him satisfaction, knowing he was contributing to a clean and healthy work environment for everyone in the building. By 9:30 a.m., Samuel's morning routine was almost complete. He returned his cleaning cart to the supply closet and made a note of any supplies he would need to restock for the next day. He washed his hands thoroughly and checked his appearance in the mirror, making sure his uniform was still neat and tidy, though his job was humble. Samuel carried himself with quiet dignity and took pride in doing his work with excellence every single day. Mr. David Roberts, the CEO of Tech Vision Corporation, was not a man who usually arrived at the office before 9 a.m. He had a driver, a personal assistant, and a schedule that was managed down to the minute. But this particular Tuesday morning was different. David had an important video conference with investors in Tokyo, and the time difference meant he needed to be in his office by 6:30 a.m. He wasn't happy about it, but business was business. David's black luxury car pulled up to the Tech Vision building at 6:15 a.m. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting long shadows across the empty parking lot. He had never seen the building this early in the morning. The lobby, usually buzzing with activity, was completely silent. He swiped his executive access card and entered through the main doors, his expensive leather shoes clicking loudly on the marble floor. As David walked toward the elevator, he noticed something unusual. The lobby was spotless. Cleaner than he had ever seen it, every surface gleamed, and there wasn't a speck of dust anywhere. He had never really paid attention to who cleaned the building, but someone was clearly doing excellent work. He pressed the elevator button and waited, checking his phone for messages from his assistant. Then he heard something that made him stop. It was a voice coming from somewhere down the hallway near the executive offices. The voice was speaking in what sounded like French, smooth and fluent. David frowned. Wondering who else could possibly be in the building at this hour, he decided to investigate. Walking quietly toward the sound as he got closer, David could see a figure pushing a cleaning cart. It was a man in a janitor's uniform, and he was talking to himself while wiping down a conference room table. But he wasn't speaking English anymore. He had switched to what sounded like Spanish. David stood in the doorway, completely confused. The janitor hadn't noticed him yet and continued his work. Now speaking in what David recognized as German, David felt his curiosity growing stronger. Who was this person? Why was he speaking so many different languages? David watched for another minute as the janitor moved to dusting the chairs, this time speaking in what sounded like Arabic. The pronunciation was clear and confident, not like someone just reciting memorized phrases. This man actually knew these languages. Finally, David cleared his throat. The janitor turned around quickly. Surprise written all across his face. His name tag read Samuel Williams, David noticed. Samuel's eyes went wide when he saw the CEO standing there in his expensive suit. He immediately stopped talking and set down his cleaning cloth. "Good morning, sir," Samuel said quietly in English, his voice respectful but slightly nervous. "I didn't expect anyone to be here this early," Samuel added, wondering if he had done something wrong. He had been working at Tech Vision for several years and had never actually met the CEO face to face. Most of the cleaning staff were invisible to the executives. Moving through the building like ghosts, David studied Samuel for a moment before speaking. "I couldn't help but notice you were speaking several different languages just now," David said, his tone curious rather than accusatory. "Was I hearing things? Or do you actually speak French, Spanish, German, and Arabic?" David asked directly. His business mind was already working. Trying to understand this unexpected discovery, Samuel hesitated, unsure how to respond. He had always practiced his languages quietly while working, never thinking anyone would hear him. "Yes, sir. I do speak those languages," Samuel finally answered. "I also speak Italian, Portuguese, Mandarin, Russian, Japanese, and Hindi," he added softly, almost embarrassed to admit it. "I've been teaching myself for many years," Samuel explained. David's eyebrows shot up in complete astonishment. 10 languages. This janitor spoke 10 languages. David himself only spoke English and barely remembered the Spanish he had studied in high school. He had employees in the international department who were paid 6-figure salaries and only spoke 2 or 3 languages. Yet here was a janitor who spoke 10. "That's remarkable," David said, genuine surprise in his voice. "How did you learn all of those languages?" he asked. Moving closer to Samuel, his early morning meeting was temporarily forgotten. David was a successful businessman because he recognized talent when he saw it, even in the most unexpected places. And this was definitely unexpected. Samuel relaxed slightly, seeing that the CEO seemed genuinely interested rather than angry. "I started learning when I moved to this city 15 years ago," Samuel explained. "My neighborhood has people from all over the world. Immigrants and refugees who needed help," Samuel continued. "Many of them couldn't speak English well, so I decided to learn their languages to help them navigate doctor's appointments, school enrollment, legal documents, things like that," Samuel shared. David listened carefully. Impressed by Samuel's motivation, So you learned 10 languages just to help people in your community, David repeated. Making sure he understood correctly, Samuel nodded. Yes, sir. I use my morning radio and library books. And I practice whenever I can, Samuel said simply. I find languages beautiful. And they help me connect with people who feel lost and alone in a new country, Samuel explained with quiet passion. For the first time in years, David felt humbled. Here was a man who cleaned toilets and mopped floors for a living. Yet he had accomplished something extraordinary through pure dedication and selflessness. David thought about all the resources he had. The money, the connections, the opportunities, and realized that Samuel had achieved something far more valuable with nothing but determination. This janitor had dedicated years of his life to helping others. Learning complex skills without any expectation of reward or recognition. Samuel, would you mind demonstrating your language skills for me? David asked, his mind already forming an idea. Samuel looked uncertain but nodded. Of course, sir. What would you like me to say? Samuel responded. David thought for a moment, then said, Introduce yourself in 5 different languages. Whichever ones you're most comfortable with, David requested. Samuel took a breath and began. He introduced himself in French, then Spanish, then Mandarin, then Arabic, and finally Japanese. Each introduction was smooth and natural. With proper pronunciation and appropriate cultural greetings, David stood there amazed, watching this humble janitor transform before his eyes with each language. Samuel wasn't just reciting memorized phrases. He was actually communicating with confidence and cultural understanding. When Samuel finished, David broke into a genuine smile. That was incredible, David said warmly. Samuel, I think we need to talk about your future at this company, David stated seriously. Samuel looked confused, worried that perhaps his language practice had somehow violated company policy. But David's next words would change everything. How would you feel about using those remarkable skills in a different capacity here at TechVision? David asked. Samuel stood there frozen, unable to fully process what the CEO had just asked him. His heart was pounding in his chest, and his mind raced with questions. What did Mr. Roberts mean by using his skills in a different capacity? Was he about to lose his janitorial position? Samuel had bills to pay and people depending on him in his neighborhood. The uncertainty made his stomach twist with anxiety before Samuel could respond. Mr. Roberts glanced at his watch and realized he was running late for his Tokyo conference call. Samuel, I need to take care of something urgent right now, Mr. Roberts said quickly. But I want you to come to my office at 2 p.m. this afternoon. We have a lot to discuss, he added with a warm smile. Don't worry, you're not in any trouble. Quite the opposite, actually, Mr. Roberts reassured him. Seeing the worry on Samuel's face with that, the CEO hurried toward the elevator, leaving Samuel standing alone in the hallway with his cleaning cart. Samuel's hands were shaking slightly as he picked up his cleaning cloth. He had no idea what would happen at 2 p.m., but he knew his life was about to change somehow. He finished his morning rounds in a daze, his mind spinning with possibilities and fears. Meanwhile, Mr. Roberts couldn't stop thinking about Samuel during his video conference. Even as he discussed quarterly earnings and market projections with the Tokyo investors, part of his brain was considering how to best utilize Samuel's extraordinary language abilities. When the meeting ended, David immediately called his executive assistant, Margaret Chen. Margaret, I need you to do something for me, David said with excitement in his voice. Margaret had worked for Mr. Roberts for 12 years and knew every tone in his voice. This was his I just discovered something amazing tone. Of course, Mr. Roberts. What do you need? Margaret asked, pulling out her notepad. I want you to find out everything you can about Samuel Williams. He works in janitorial services, David explained. And please arrange a 2 p.m. meeting in my office with him. Make sure he knows this is a positive meeting, not a disciplinary one, David added. Margaret was immediately curious. In all her years working for the CEO, he had never asked her to arrange a meeting with a janitor. May I ask what this is regarding? Margaret inquired politely. David leaned back in his chair with a grin. Let's just say I discovered some hidden talent this morning that could be very valuable to this company, he said mysteriously. You'll see at the meeting, and Margaret. I have a feeling this is going to be interesting, David added. After hanging up with his assistant, David couldn't resist sharing the news with someone. He called his vice president of human resources, Linda Martinez. Linda, you're never going to believe what I just discovered, David said enthusiastically. He proceeded to tell her the entire story about encountering Samuel and his 10 languages. Linda listened with growing amazement, asking questions and trying to understand the full picture. David, this is incredible, Linda finally said. We have international clients in every region Samuel mentioned. And we've been struggling to find qualified translators and cultural liaisons, Linda explained. If this janitor is as skilled as you say, we might have found a solution to several problems we've been facing, she added thoughtfully. I'll sit in on the 2 p.m. meeting and bring some ideas for how we might incorporate his talents, Linda offered. News of the mysterious janitor with 10 languages began spreading through the executive floor like wildfire. Margaret mentioned it to her friend in accounting during lunch break. The accounting friend told someone in marketing. The marketing person shared it with the IT department. By noon, dozens of employees had heard some version of the story, with each retelling. The details became slightly more dramatic and exaggerated. Some employees heard that the janitor spoke 20 languages. Others were told he was actually a former diplomat who had fallen on hard times. A few people claimed he was secretly wealthy and cleaned floors just for the love of it. The break room buzzed with speculation and excitement. Did you hear about the janitor who's actually a genius? One person would whisper to another. I heard the CEO is going to promote him to vice president, someone else claimed. Down in the janitorial department, Samuel's co-workers noticed something was different about him. Samuel, you okay, man? Asked Marcus, another janitor who had become Samuel's friend over the years. You seem distracted today, Marcus observed. Samuel hesitated, then decided to share what had happened. I ran into Mr. Roberts this morning, and he heard me speaking different languages, Samuel explained quietly. Marcus's eyes went wide. Wait, the CEO knows about your language thing? Marcus asked in surprise. What did he say? Are you in trouble? Marcus questioned worriedly. Samuel shook his head. No, he actually seemed impressed. He wants to meet with me at 2 p.m. in his office, Samuel shared. Marcus let out a low whistle. Brother, I think your life is about to get real interesting, Marcus said with a mixture of excitement and concern. By 1:30 p.m., Samuel was a nervous wreck. He changed out of his work uniform and put on the clean button-down shirt and slacks he kept in his locker for emergencies. His hands were sweaty, and he checked his appearance in the bathroom mirror 3 times. Other employees who passed by looked at him with curious expressions, clearly having heard some version of the morning's events. At 1:55 p.m., Samuel took the elevator up to the executive floor. The elevator ride felt like it lasted forever. When the doors opened, he stepped into a world he had only seen while cleaning at night. The executive floor had expensive artwork on the walls, plush carpeting, and floor-to-ceiling windows with views of the entire city. Margaret greeted him warmly at the reception desk. You must be Samuel, Margaret said with a friendly smile. Mr. Roberts is expecting you, and I just want you to know that everyone up here is very excited to meet you, she added kindly. Samuel's nervousness increased even more. What did she mean by everyone? Was this going to be some kind of group meeting? Margaret led Samuel down a hallway to a large conference room instead of Mr. Roberts' office. Through the glass walls, Samuel could see several people already seated around the table. His heart sank. He had expected a private conversation, not a formal meeting with multiple executives. Deep breaths. Samuel, Margaret whispered encouragingly before opening the door. Mr. Roberts stood up immediately when Samuel entered, his face breaking into a warm smile. Samuel, thank you for coming, David said, gesturing to an empty chair. I hope you don't mind, but I've invited a few colleagues who are very interested in hearing about your remarkable language skills. David explained. Samuel nodded silently, taking his seat at the conference table. He looked around at the faces of vice presidents and department heads, all watching him with curious and interested expressions. Samuel, I've told everyone about our conversation this morning, Mr. Roberts began. But I'd like you to share your story in your own words. Tell us how you learned 10 languages and what motivated you to develop such an incredible skill, David requested gently. Samuel took a deep breath. This was the moment that would determine everything. Samuel cleared his throat and began to speak, his voice steady despite his nervousness. Thank you for inviting me here, Mr. Roberts, Samuel started, looking around the table at all the expectant faces. I guess I should begin from the beginning, he said, folding his hands on the table to keep them from shaking. The executives leaned forward in their chairs, genuinely interested in what this humble janitor had to say. I came to this city 15 years ago with almost nothing, Samuel explained. I was young, broke, and looking for any work I could find to support myself, he continued. I ended up living in a neighborhood on the east side, where rent was cheap and most of my neighbors were immigrants and refugees from all over the world, Samuel shared. He paused, remembering those early, difficult days when he barely had enough money for food. My apartment building was like a little United Nations, Samuel said with a small smile. There were families from Somalia, Syria, Mexico, China, Russia, Brazil, and so many other countries, he listed. Most of them were struggling, just like me, but they also faced an extra challenge that I didn't have. They couldn't speak English well, Samuel explained. His eyes grew more passionate as he spoke about his neighbors. Linda Martinez, the VP of Human Resources, spoke up gently. What made you decide to help them? She asked with genuine curiosity. Samuel thought for a moment before answering. One night, I heard a woman crying in the hallway, Samuel began. Her name was Amira, and she was from Syria, he continued. She had received an important letter from the hospital about her daughter's medical appointment. But she couldn't read it, Samuel shared. I helped her translate the letter using my phone and a dictionary, Samuel explained. The relief on her face when she finally understood what the letter said. It changed something in me, he said quietly. I realized that language wasn't just about words, it was about dignity, access, and hope, Samuel added with conviction. The room was completely silent, with everyone hanging on his every word. After that night, more neighbors started coming to me for help, Samuel continued. They needed help with school forms for their children, lease agreements, job applications, medical documents, all kinds of things, he listed. I could help them with English, but I wanted to do more, Samuel said. So I started learning their languages, he explained simply. I figured if they were working so hard to learn English, the least I could do was meet them halfway, Samuel added. Mr. Roberts interrupted with a question. But how did you actually learn 10 languages? That must have taken incredible dedication, David asked. Clearly impressed, Samuel nodded. It did take time. A lot of time, he admitted. I got library cards from 3 different library systems so I could borrow more language books and audio programs, Samuel explained. I listened to international radio stations during my work shifts, he added. I also started attending community centers where different cultural groups met, Samuel shared. I would sit with elderly immigrants and ask them to teach me phrases while I helped them with their English paperwork, he explained. They became my teachers and I became theirs, Samuel said warmly. Every evening after work, I would study for 2 or 3 hours, practicing pronunciation, memorizing vocabulary, learning grammar rules, he described one of the executives. The director of international relations raised his hand. Samuel, can you tell us which languages you speak and why you chose those specific ones? He asked professionally. Samuel nodded and began listing them. Spanish? Because about 40% of my neighborhood speaks it, he started. Arabic for families from Syria, Iraq, and Yemen, he continued. Mandarin Chinese, for the large Chinese community in my area, Samuel went on. French, which helps me communicate with people from Haiti, West Africa, and some Middle Eastern countries, he added. Portuguese for Brazilian families, Russian for refugees from former Soviet countries, German because one of my best friends is from Germany, Hindi for Indian families, Italian for some elderly neighbors, and Japanese because I wanted to challenge myself with a completely different writing system, Samuel finished. The room erupted in quiet murmurs of amazement. Linda Martinez spoke again. Samuel, what you've accomplished is extraordinary, but I'm curious. Do you actually use all these languages regularly? She inquired. Samuel's face lit up. Oh yes, every single day, he answered enthusiastically. I help people make phone calls to doctors' offices, translate at parent-teacher conferences, explain bills and legal documents, and sometimes I just sit and talk with lonely elderly immigrants who miss speaking their native language, Samuel shared. Last month, I helped a Russian grandmother apply for citizenship, Samuel continued with pride. 3 weeks ago, I translated at a hospital for a Chinese family whose son needed emergency surgery, he added. Yesterday, I helped a Somali family understand their lease renewal, Samuel listed. These languages aren't just skills to me. They're bridges that connect people to the help they desperately need, he said passionately. Mr. Roberts glanced at Linda and then back at Samuel. You mentioned you work these volunteer hours in addition to your full-time job here. When do you sleep? David asked with concern and admiration. Samuel laughed softly. I manage, Mr. Roberts, he replied. The work I do in my neighborhood gives my life meaning, Samuel explained. Seeing a mother's face when she finally understands her child's school report, or helping an elderly man read a letter from his family back home, those moments make the tired nights worth it, he shared. Another executive spoke up, the chief operating officer. Samuel, have you ever considered working professionally as a translator or interpreter? You clearly have the skills for it, she asked directly. Samuel looked down at his hands. I've thought about it, he admitted. But professional translation services charge fees that my neighbors can't afford, Samuel explained. And I didn't have the formal credentials or connections to work for companies or organizations, he added. Besides, I never really saw myself as qualified, Samuel said honestly. I'm self-taught, I don't have any degrees or certifications, he pointed out. I always figured companies like this one would want people with formal education. Not someone like me who learned languages from library books and radio shows, Samuel admitted, his voice showing a hint of insecurity. Mr. Roberts leaned forward with intensity. Samuel, let me tell you something important, David began. I've met people with multiple degrees in languages who don't have half the practical communication skills you've demonstrated, he stated firmly. The fact that you're self-taught makes your achievement even more impressive. Not less, David emphasized. It shows determination, discipline, and genuine passion, qualities that no university can teach, he added. Linda nodded in agreement. Samuel, we have international clients and partners in every region you mentioned, she explained. We've been struggling to find people who can not only translate words, but also understand cultural context and communicate with sensitivity, Linda continued. From what you've told us today, you have exactly that kind of deep, practical understanding, she said with conviction. Samuel looked around the table, seeing nothing but supportive and encouraging faces. For the first time in the meeting, he allowed himself to feel a small spark of hope. Maybe his years of study and volunteer work could become something more. Maybe his skills were actually valuable in ways he had never imagined. The room felt warm with possibility, and Samuel's heart began to beat with cautious excitement. Mr. Roberts stood up, signaling that something important was about to happen. Samuel, what I'm about to propose might surprise you, but I want you to seriously consider it, David said with a smile. Everyone in the room turned their full attention to the CEO. This was the moment Samuel's entire life was about to change direction. Mr. Roberts walked around the conference table, his presence commanding everyone's attention. Samuel, I've been running this company for 20 years, and I've learned that true talent often hides in unexpected places, David began thoughtfully. What you've accomplished through pure dedication and compassion is more valuable than any degree or certificate, he stated firmly. Samuel's heart was racing as he waited to hear what the CEO would say next. I'd like to offer you a new position at TechVision Corporation, Mr. Roberts announced. The room fell completely silent. We want to create a role specifically designed around your unique skills and experience, David continued. You would become our Director of Cultural Integration and Language Services, he revealed. Samuel's eyes widened in shock, unable to believe what he was hearing. Linda Martinez jumped in to explain further. Samuel, this wouldn't be just a translator position, she clarified. You would help us build an entire department focused on diversity, inclusion, and international communication, Linda described. We have clients and partners in dozens of countries, and we need someone who understands not just languages, but cultures, barriers, and how to bridge them, she emphasized. Samuel sat frozen, trying to process this overwhelming information. The chief operating officer added her thoughts. We've struggled for years to connect authentically with our international partners, she admitted. Our current approach has been too formal, too disconnected, she explained. Someone with your background could transform how we communicate across cultures and make our company truly global in spirit. Not just in business presence, she suggested. Samuel could hardly breathe as he listened to these powerful executives discuss his potential. Mr. Roberts continued laying out the vision. Your department would have 3 main functions, David explained, counting on his fingers. First, you would provide translation and interpretation services for our international business dealings, he listed. Second, you would develop cultural sensitivity training programs for all our employees, David added. And third, you would establish community outreach programs connecting TechVision with immigrant and refugee communities, he finished. Each responsibility sounded more incredible than the last. We would start you with a team of 3 assistants, Linda interjected. You would have your own office on the executive floor, a full benefits package, and a starting salary of $95,000 per year, she stated clearly. Samuel gasped audibly at the figure. That was more than triple what he currently earned as a janitor. He had never imagined making that kind of money in his entire life. But here's what I find most exciting, Mr. Roberts continued with growing enthusiasm. We want to partner with local community organizations to provide free translation and cultural services to immigrant families, David proposed. You would be able to continue your volunteer work, but with company resources and support behind you, he explained. We would pay for professional certification courses in translation and interpretation, David added. Samuel felt tears forming in his eyes as he realized what this opportunity meant. The director of international relations spoke up. Samuel, I manage relationships with clients in 15 countries, he shared. I've seen how miscommunication and cultural misunderstandings cost us contracts and partnerships, he admitted honestly. Having someone like you who can navigate these sensitive situations with both language skills and genuine cultural empathy would be invaluable, he emphasized. I would personally work closely with your department, he promised. Samuel appreciated the support he was hearing from every person in the room. Samuel finally found his voice, though it shook with emotion. I don't know what to say, he began quietly. This is beyond anything I ever dreamed possible, Samuel admitted. But I have to ask why me, he questioned. I'm just a janitor who learned some languages to help his neighbors, Samuel said humbly. There must be people with better qualifications. Formal education, professional experience, he pointed out. Mr. Roberts shook his head firmly. Samuel, you're wrong about that, David countered. We've hired people with impressive credentials before, but they lacked something essential that you have in abundance, he explained. You have authenticity, compassion, and real-world experience working with the exact communities we want to serve, David listed. You learned languages not for career advancement or money, but to help people who were struggling and alone, he emphasized. That kind of motivation produces a depth of understanding that no classroom can teach, David stated with conviction. Linda added her perspective. Samuel, traditional diversity and inclusion programs often feel forced or performative, she said honestly. They're created by people who understand the theory, but lack practical experience, Linda explained. You've lived this work. You know what immigrants and refugees actually need because you've been serving them for 15 years, she pointed out. That grassroots experience is exactly what makes you the perfect person for this role, Linda assured him. I need to be honest with you all, Samuel said. Taking a deep breath. I'm scared, he admitted openly. I've been a janitor for so long. I know how to do that job well, Samuel explained. This new position sounds amazing, but it's also terrifying, he confessed. What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? Samuel voiced his fears. His vulnerability filled the room with a heavy silence. The chief operating officer smiled warmly at Samuel. Do you know what I hear when you say that? She asked gently. I hear someone who takes responsibility seriously and wants to do excellent work, she interpreted. Those fears prove you're the right person for this job, she insisted. Someone who wasn't scared would be overconfident and likely to make mistakes, she explained. Your humility and awareness are strengths, not weaknesses, she reassured him. Mr. Roberts moved closer to Samuel. I'm going to tell you something important, David said seriously. When I started this company 20 years ago, I was terrified too, he revealed. I had a business degree and some capital, but I had no idea if I could actually succeed, David shared. Every successful person I know has felt that fear when facing something new and challenging, he continued. The difference is that they moved forward despite the fear, David emphasized. I believe you have that same courage, he told Samuel directly. Linda pulled out a folder she had brought to the meeting. Samuel, we've prepared a formal offer letter with all the details, she said. We're not asking you to decide right this moment, Linda clarified. Take the document home, read it carefully. Think about what this means for your life, she suggested. You can have until Monday to give us your answer, Linda offered. She slid the folder across the table toward Samuel. Samuel picked up the folder with trembling hands. Can I ask one more question? He said quietly. Everyone nodded encouragingly. What happens to the janitorial position if I take this job? Samuel asked with concern. I don't want Marcus or any of my co-workers to have extra work because of me, he explained. His thoughtfulness about his colleagues impressed everyone in the room. We'll hire someone new to fill your current position, Mr. Roberts assured him. Your co-workers won't be burdened, he promised. In fact, if you accept this offer, we'd like you to help us improve working conditions and benefits for our entire janitorial and maintenance staff, David added. You understand their challenges better than anyone, he pointed out. Samuel's eyes filled with tears again, grateful that the CEO cared about his former co-workers. The meeting was coming to an end, and everyone stood up. Each executive came around to shake Samuel's hand and express their enthusiasm about potentially working with him. They shared their contact information and encouraged him to reach out with any questions. Samuel felt overwhelmed by their kindness and support. These powerful people were treating him with genuine respect and warmth. As Samuel walked toward the door, folder clutched in his hands, Mr. Roberts called out to him, "Samuel, one more thing," David said. Samuel turned around to face the CEO. "Regardless of what you decide, I want you to know that meeting you this morning reminded me why I started this company," David shared. "It's about creating opportunities and recognizing potential wherever it exists," he explained. "Thank you for that gift," David said sincerely. Samuel nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Samuel left the executive floor in a daze, taking the elevator back down to the basement where the janitorial break room was located. Marcus saw him immediately and jumped up from his chair. "Brother, what happened up there?" Marcus asked urgently. "You've been gone for over an hour," he noted with concern. Samuel sat down heavily and opened the folder, showing Marcus the offer letter. Marcus's eyes grew wider and wider as he read the details. "Samuel, they're offering you a director position," Marcus said in amazement. "This is incredible, man. This is your chance," Marcus exclaimed with pure joy for his friend. Samuel walked home that Friday evening in a complete daze. The folder containing his job offer clutched tightly against his chest. The bus ride felt different tonight, as if the whole world had shifted beneath his feet. He stared out the window, watching familiar streets pass by, wondering if his life would ever be the same again. The weight of the decision ahead pressed down on him with every block that brought him closer to home. When Samuel reached his apartment building, he found his neighbor Mrs. Chen sitting on the front steps. She was an elderly Chinese woman he had been helping for years with translation and paperwork. "Samuel, you're home late today," Mrs. Chen observed in her accented English. "Everything okay?" she asked with concern in her voice. Samuel sat down next to her, suddenly feeling the need to share his incredible news with someone who understood his journey. "Mrs. Chen, something amazing happened today," Samuel began. His voice filled with wonder. He told her the entire story, from the early morning encounter with the CEO to the job offer he now held in his hands. Mrs. Chen listened carefully, her weathered face breaking into a huge smile as Samuel spoke. "This is your blessing, Samuel," she said warmly in Mandarin. Then repeated in English, "You help so many people. Now life help you back," she added with tears in her eyes. Samuel went up to his small studio apartment and sat on his bed, finally opening the folder to read the offer letter carefully. Every word seemed almost too good to be true. The salary alone would transform his life completely. He could afford a better apartment, pay off his debts, maybe even help his mother who lived in another state. But money wasn't what made his hands shake as he read the job description. It was the possibility of doing meaningful work on a much larger scale. He pulled out his phone and called his mother, something he only did once a week because long-distance calls cost money. "Mama, I need to tell you something incredible," Samuel said when she answered. He explained everything that had happened, barely able to keep the excitement from his voice. His mother was silent for a long moment after he finished. "Baby, I'm so proud of you," she finally said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Your father would be so proud too," she added, mentioning Samuel's late father who had always encouraged his education. "But Mama, I'm scared," Samuel admitted honestly. "What if I'm not smart enough for this job?" He voiced his deepest fear. "What if I fail and disappoint everyone?" he continued. His mother made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Samuel James Williams, you listen to me right now," she said firmly. "You taught yourself 10 languages while working full-time and volunteering every night," she reminded him. "If that doesn't prove you're smart enough—" "Nothing will," his mother insisted. Saturday morning arrived, and Samuel woke early out of habit, even though he didn't have to work weekends. He made coffee and sat at his small kitchen table. Reading the offer letter for the 10th time, every detail seemed designed perfectly for him. The community outreach component especially excited him because it meant he could continue helping his neighbors, but with real resources behind him. He wouldn't have to scrape together money for bus fare to take someone to appointments anymore. The company would provide support around noon. There was a knock on Samuel's door. He opened it to find several of his neighbors crowded in the hallway. Mrs. Chen had apparently shared his news, and word had spread through the building like wildfire. "Is it true?" asked Mr. Osman, a Somali man Samuel had been helping for 5 years. "Did they really offer you an executive job?" questioned Maria. A Brazilian single mother, Samuel nodded, feeling overwhelmed by their presence. What happened next brought tears to Samuel's eyes. His neighbors pulled him into the hallway and began celebrating, hugging him, patting his back, speaking rapidly in their various languages. "You deserve this," Mrs. Chen said. "You changed my life," added Ahmed, a Syrian refugee. "You helped my children succeed in school," Maria said with emotion, one by one. They shared stories of how Samuel's help had made a difference in their lives. "But I'm worried about leaving you all," Samuel confessed to the group. "Who will help with translations and appointments if I take this new job?" he asked with genuine concern. Mr. Osmond laughed and put his hand on Samuel's shoulder. "Samuel, you told us the company will support community work," he reminded him. "That means you can help even more people, not fewer," Mr. Osmond pointed out wisely. "You will have resources, connections, maybe employees to help," he added. "This is good for all of us," he concluded. Samuel spent Saturday afternoon walking through his neighborhood, thinking deeply about the decision. He passed the community center where he volunteered teaching English classes. He walked by the clinic where he often translated for patients. He stopped at the small library where he had borrowed countless language books over the years. Every corner of this neighborhood held memories of people he had helped and connections he had made. Could he really leave his janitorial job and step into this new unknown role that evening? Samuel attended his weekly volunteer session at the Refugee Resettlement Center. He had committed to helping a new family from Afghanistan adjust to life in America. The father, Hamid, noticed Samuel seemed distracted. "Something troubles you, my friend?" Hamid asked in his limited English. Samuel decided to share his situation, explaining the job offer and his conflicting feelings. Hamid listened carefully, nodding thoughtfully. "In Afghanistan, I was teacher," Hamid said slowly, choosing his words with care. "Very good teacher, respected in community," he continued. "But I had to leave everything. Start over here with nothing," Hamid explained. "Now I work in warehouse, very hard labor," he added. "But you know what I dream of?" Hamid asked, looking directly at Samuel. "I dream that one day, someone like you gives me chance to teach again," he revealed. "Don't waste your chance, Samuel. Take the opportunity and use it to help more people like us," Hamid urged. Sunday morning, Samuel went to church, something he did every week without fail. The pastor's sermon that day seemed to speak directly to his situation. Though the pastor had no knowledge of Samuel's dilemma, "Sometimes God opens doors we never expected," the pastor preached. "And sometimes we're afraid to walk through those doors because we feel unworthy or unprepared," he continued. "But faith means trusting that the door was opened for a reason," the pastor concluded. Samuel felt chills run down his spine. After church, Samuel returned to his apartment and spread out all his materials on his bed. He made 2 lists on a piece of paper. One labeled reasons to accept and another labeled reasons to decline. The reasons to accept list grew quickly. Better salary, opportunity to help more people, chance to use his skills professionally, resources to support his community work, career advancement, health insurance, the ability to help his mother financially. The reasons to decline list was much shorter. Fear of failure, comfort with current job, worry about leaving coworkers. As Samuel looked at his lists, the answer became clear. Every reason to decline was based on fear, while every reason to accept was based on opportunity and growth. He thought about all the conversations he'd had over the weekend with his mother, his neighbors, Hamid, and even the pastor's words. They were all telling him the same thing in different ways. This was his moment and he needed to take it. Fear was natural, but it shouldn't be the deciding factor. Samuel picked up his phone and composed a text message to his friend Marcus. "I'm going to accept the offer," he typed. "I'm scared out of my mind, but I'm going to do it," he added. Marcus's response came back immediately. "About time, brother. You got this," followed by multiple celebration emojis. Samuel smiled, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. The decision was made. He pulled out the offer letter one more time and read the final paragraph, where it asked him to sign and date if he accepted the position. Samuel found a pen, took a deep breath, and signed his name. His hand was steady now. No longer shaking with fear, he dated it Sunday, October 26, 2025, the day his life changed forever. Tomorrow morning, he would go to work early and deliver his acceptance letter directly to Mr. Roberts. Tonight, Samuel felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in years. He was ready for this new chapter before going to bed. Samuel knelt down and said a prayer of gratitude. He thanked God for the opportunity, for the people who supported him, and for the courage to say yes to something that terrified him. He also prayed for wisdom and strength to succeed in this new role. As he climbed into bed, Samuel felt exhausted but hopeful. Tomorrow would be the beginning of something extraordinary. He closed his eyes and slept peacefully for the first time since Friday morning. Monday morning arrived with bright sunshine streaming through Samuel's apartment window, and he woke up before his alarm went off at 4:30 a.m. But today was different because he wasn't waking up to clean floors and empty trash cans. Today, Samuel Williams was starting his new position as Director of Cultural Integration and Language Services. He showered carefully, put on the new suit he had purchased over the weekend with money borrowed from his savings, and looked at himself in the mirror. The man staring back at him looked both terrified and excited. Samuel arrived at Tech Vision Corporation at 7 a.m., 2 hours earlier than his official start time. He carried the signed offer letter in a folder under his arm, and his heart pounded with each step toward the building. The security guard at the front desk looked surprised to see him. "Samuel, you're here early," the guard noted. "And dressed up nice. What's the occasion?" he asked curiously. Samuel smiled and explained that he was starting a new position in the company. The guard's eyes widened with surprise and then happiness. "Congratulations, man, that's amazing," he said warmly. Samuel took the elevator up to the executive floor. His new workplace, Margaret Chen, Mr. Roberts' assistant, was already at her desk despite the early hour. "Samuel, welcome," Margaret greeted him with a warm smile. "Mr. Roberts asked me to get you settled in your new office," she explained. "He'll meet with you at 9 a.m. to go over your first week's priorities," Margaret added. Leading Samuel down a hallway, they stopped at a corner office with windows overlooking the city. "This is your space now," Margaret said, opening the door. Samuel stepped inside and felt his breath catch in his throat. The office was larger than his entire apartment. There was a beautiful wooden desk, comfortable chairs, bookshelves along one wall, and a small meeting table by the windows. "Your computer is already set up with all the necessary access," Margaret explained, pointing to the laptop on the desk. "Your business cards will arrive by the end of the week," she continued. "And Linda Martinez from HR will be here at 8 a.m. to walk you through your benefits and paperwork," Margaret informed him. Samuel could only nod, still overwhelmed by the reality of his new circumstances after Margaret left. Samuel sat in his new office chair and slowly turned to look out the windows. From this height, he could see the entire city spreading out before him, including the neighborhood where he lived just days ago. He had been cleaning these very offices in the early morning darkness. Now he sat here as an executive, entrusted with important responsibilities. The transformation felt almost surreal, like something from a dream he might wake up from at any moment. At 8 a.m. sharp, Linda Martinez arrived with a stack of paperwork. "Good morning, Director Williams," Linda said with a smile. The title sounded strange to Samuel's ears, but Linda's warm professionalism helped him relax. They spent the next hour going through health insurance options, retirement plans, vacation policies, and other benefits. Samuel learned he would have 3 weeks of paid vacation per year, full health coverage, and even a company phone. Each benefit Linda described seemed more generous than the last. "Now let's talk about your team," Linda said, pulling out another document. "We've already begun the hiring process for your 3 assistant positions," she explained. "You'll be interviewing candidates starting next week," Linda continued. "We're looking for people with diverse language skills and cultural competencies to support your department's mission," she added. Samuel felt a rush of excitement at the thought of building his own team. He could hire people who understood the immigrant experience and genuinely cared about helping communities. At 9 a.m., Mr. Roberts arrived at Samuel's office, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "I figured you might need this," David said. Handing 1 cup to Samuel, they sat at the small meeting table, and Mr. Roberts pulled out a detailed plan for Samuel's first 90 days. "I want you to know that we don't expect you to have all the answers immediately," David began. "This is a learning process, and we'll support you every step of the way," he reassured Samuel. Mr. Roberts outlined Samuel's initial priorities. First, he would spend 2 weeks observing different departments and understanding how the company currently handled international communications. Second, he would develop a strategic plan for his department, including goals, timelines, and resource requirements. Third, he would begin establishing partnerships with community organizations for the outreach programs. "I also want you to attend our executive leadership meetings starting next week," David added. "Your perspective will be valuable as we make decisions about our international expansion," he explained. As Mr. Roberts spoke, Samuel took careful notes on a legal pad. His hand was steady now, and his confidence grew with each detail discussed. "Do you have any questions or concerns?" David asked when he finished presenting the plan. Samuel thought for a moment before speaking. I want to make sure I honor the work of the janitorial staff who are still here, Samuel said sincerely. I was one of them just days ago, and I don't want to forget where I came from, he added. Mr. Roberts smiled broadly. Samuel, that's exactly why you're the right person for this job, David responded. That awareness and humility will serve you well as a leader, he added. In fact, I'd like you to chair a committee to review working conditions and compensation for all support staff, David proposed. Use your experience to help us improve our company culture from the ground up, he suggested. Samuel felt tears prick his eyes but blinked them back, nodding his agreement. By mid-morning, word had spread throughout the company that the janitor who spoke 10 languages was now a director. Employees kept finding reasons to walk past Samuel's office, curious to catch a glimpse of him. Some people Samuel had never met stopped by to introduce themselves and welcome him. Others who had worked at Tech Vision for years confessed they had never noticed him during his janitorial days, but were excited to work with him now. The attention felt strange but mostly positive. At noon, Marcus, Samuel's former co-worker from janitorial services, appeared at his office door looking nervous. Is it okay if I come in? Marcus asked hesitantly. Samuel jumped up immediately and pulled Marcus into a hug. Of course, brother, you're always welcome here, Samuel insisted warmly. They sat down and Marcus looked around the office with wonder. Man, this is incredible, Marcus said. You really made it, he added with genuine happiness for his friend, Marcus. I couldn't have done this without your support, Samuel said seriously. You encouraged me when I doubted myself, Samuel reminded him. And I want you to know that I'm going to work hard to improve things for everyone in our department. Your department now, Samuel promised. Marcus nodded, looking emotional. Just don't forget about us little people down in the basement, Marcus joked, though his eyes showed he was only half kidding. Never, Samuel vowed. I'll never forget where I came from or who helped me along the way, he added with conviction. That afternoon, Samuel began his observation tour of the company. He visited the international sales department, where he listened to team members describe their challenges communicating with clients in Asia, Europe, and South America. He met with the human resources team to understand their current diversity initiatives. He spoke with customer service representatives who often struggled to help non-English speaking customers. With each conversation, Samuel took detailed notes and began forming ideas for how his department could help. By 5 p.m., Samuel was exhausted but exhilarated. His first day as Director of Cultural Integration and Language Services had been overwhelming but wonderful. As he packed up his briefcase to leave, Samuel looked around his office one more time. This wasn't just a job, it was a calling. A chance to use his skills and experiences to make a real difference. He thought about all the people who had believed in him. His mother, his neighbors, Mr. Roberts, and everyone who had encouraged him to take this leap. Samuel turned off his office light and walked toward the elevator. Tomorrow he would return to continue building something meaningful. But tonight, he wanted to go home to his neighborhood and share this day with the people who had been part of his journey. As he rode the bus home, Samuel looked out the window and smiled. His life had changed forever, and he was ready for whatever came next. The fear was still there, but it was now balanced by hope, purpose, and the knowledge that he belonged in that executive office just as much as anyone else. 6 months had passed since Samuel Williams became Director of Cultural Integration and Language Services at Tech Vision Corporation, and the transformation he had created was nothing short of remarkable. His department, which started with just him and a borrowed desk, now employed 12 people representing 15 different languages and cultural backgrounds. The office suite on the executive floor buzzed with activity as team members provided translation services, conducted cultural training sessions, and coordinated community outreach programs. Samuel had built something extraordinary from nothing. The impact on Tech Vision's business operations was immediately measurable. International contracts that had previously stalled due to communication barriers were now moving forward smoothly. Samuel's team provided not just translation but cultural context, helping executives understand the nuances of doing business in different countries. A major deal with a Japanese technology firm, which had been struggling for 8 months, was successfully closed within 3 weeks after Samuel's intervention. The CEO of the Japanese company specifically praised Samuel's cultural sensitivity and language skills in the closing meeting. But Samuel's greatest achievement wasn't measured in contracts or revenue alone. He had fundamentally changed the culture of Tech Vision Corporation from the inside out. The cultural sensitivity training programs he developed were now mandatory for all employees, from entry-level positions to senior executives. These weren't boring PowerPoint presentations that people sat through reluctantly. Instead, Samuel created interactive workshops where employees learned about different cultures through storytelling, role-playing, and authentic conversations with people from those communities. Attendance feedback showed that 92% of employees rated the training as valuable and eye-opening. The community outreach program Samuel launched had become the pride of TechVision Corporation. The company partnered with 5 local refugee resettlement organizations, providing free translation services, job training, and technology education to immigrant families. Samuel personally trained 20 TechVision employees as volunteer tutors and mentors, creating a pipeline of community engagement that went far beyond corporate charity. These weren't just donations or one-time volunteer events. They were sustained relationships that made a real difference in people's lives. Local news stations had featured the program twice, bringing positive publicity to the company. Samuel's former neighborhood had benefited enormously from his new position. The community center where he used to volunteer now received technology equipment donated by TechVision, including computers, tablets, and internet access for families who couldn't afford these resources. 3 of Samuel's neighbors had been hired by TechVision in various departments after Samuel helped them with resume writing, interview preparation, and professional development. Mrs. Chen's grandson received a college scholarship funded by TechVision's new diversity initiative, which Samuel had proposed and helped establish. The connections between the corporation and the community grew stronger every month. Inside TechVision, Samuel had also championed significant improvements for support staff. The committee he chaired had successfully advocated for better wages, improved benefits, and professional development opportunities for janitorial, maintenance, and cafeteria workers. Starting pay for these positions had increased by 18%, and the company now offered tuition reimbursement for employees who wanted to pursue additional education or training. Marcus, Samuel's former co-worker and friend, was currently taking business administration classes at the local community college, paid for entirely by TechVision. Several other support staff members had enrolled in various educational programs as well. The transformation extended to how employees throughout the company viewed each other and their work. Departments that had operated in isolation now collaborated regularly, sharing perspectives and learning from each other's experiences. The walls between executives and support staff had begun to break down, with people from all levels of the organization participating in cross-functional teams and company events. Samuel's story had inspired others to share their own hidden talents and passions. An accountant revealed she was a skilled photographer and started teaching photography classes during lunch hours. A software engineer who spoke 3 languages joined Samuel's department part-time. The culture of the entire company had shifted toward recognizing and celebrating the whole person, not just their job title. Mr. Roberts had become one of Samuel's strongest advocates and supporters. At the most recent board of directors meeting, David had presented data showing that employee satisfaction scores had increased by 23% since Samuel's department was established. Customer satisfaction ratings for international clients had jumped by 35%. Employee retention rates were at their highest level in company history. The board approved a budget increase for Samuel's department and authorized the hiring of 5 additional staff members. David publicly credited Samuel with transforming TechVision into a truly global and inclusive organization. Samuel had grown tremendously in his role, both professionally and personally. The scared janitor who had sat nervously in the conference room 6 months ago was now a confident leader who commanded respect through competence and compassion. He attended executive leadership training programs, read extensively about organizational development and cultural integration, and sought mentorship from experienced directors in the company. Samuel had discovered that leadership wasn't about knowing everything. It was about caring deeply, listening carefully, and empowering others to contribute their best. These principles guided every decision he made. His personal life had also transformed in meaningful ways. Samuel had moved to a nicer apartment, though he deliberately chose to stay in the same neighborhood where his journey had begun. He wanted to remain connected to the community that had shaped him and continue being accessible to the people he served. He purchased a reliable car, which made it easier to transport neighbors to appointments and events. Samuel sent money to his mother every month, helping her with expenses and allowing her to reduce her work hours. The financial security he now enjoyed was used not just for himself, but to bless others who had supported him along the way. Samuel's language skills continued to grow even in his new role. He was currently studying his 11th language, Swahili. Because TechVision was exploring business opportunities in East Africa, his passion for languages and cultural connection hadn't diminished despite his professional success. If anything, it had deepened. Samuel understood that his gift wasn't just the ability to speak multiple languages, it was the ability to build bridges between different worlds, to help people understand each other across barriers of language, culture, and circumstance. This was his true calling, and he was grateful every day for the opportunity to live it fully. On a Friday afternoon in late April, Samuel received an unexpected invitation. The mayor of the city wanted to honor him at a special ceremony, recognizing community leaders who had made outstanding contributions to immigrant integration and cultural diversity. Samuel would receive the Key to the City Award at a gala event attended by hundreds of civic leaders, business executives, and community members. When he read the invitation, Samuel felt overwhelmed with emotion. He thought about the long journey from that early morning encounter with Mr. Roberts to this moment of public recognition. But what made Samuel most proud wasn't the awards or the title or even the impressive office. It was the lives he had touched and the opportunities he had created for others. It was Mrs. Chen's grandson going to college, Marcus taking business classes, immigrant families getting the help they needed, and TechVision employees learning to see the humanity in everyone regardless of position or background. These were the true measures of success. The connections made, the barriers broken, and the hope restored. Samuel had discovered that his purpose was bigger than himself, and that realization filled him with profound gratitude and joy. As Samuel sat in his office that evening, looking out over the city lights, he reflected on how one conversation had changed everything. If Mr. Roberts hadn't arrived early that Tuesday morning, if he hadn't been curious enough to investigate, if he hadn't been willing to see potential in unexpected places, Samuel's life might have continued on its previous path indefinitely. But the CEO had looked beyond the janitor's uniform and recognized something valuable. That single act of recognition had created ripples that spread far beyond Samuel himself. Touching hundreds of lives and transforming an entire organization, Samuel pulled out his journal, something he had started keeping to document this incredible journey. He wrote a simple entry for the day. 6 months ago, I was invisible. Today I am seen, but more importantly, I help others be seen too. This is what I was meant to do. He closed the journal and smiled. Tomorrow was Saturday, and he would spend the day in his neighborhood, helping families with translation, teaching language classes, and continuing the work that had always given his life meaning. Because no matter how much his circumstances had changed, Samuel's heart remained exactly where it had always been, in service to others, and that he knew would never change.